All right, problem number 19. All unpleasant experiences are things we do not like to remember. Therefore, all things we like to remember are pleasant experiences. All right, so the first thing I do always identify the conclusion and the premise. We've got a nice conclusion indicator here with therefore. So now I know what the premise is, I know what the conclusion is, and I can take the next step of identifying the subject and predicate terms. Now here, I can see that the subject and predicate terms of the premise and the conclusion are different. The subject terms are pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences. And the other term of the argument are things we like to remember and things we don't like to remember. Okay, so those are four different types of things. And with these kinds of arguments, immediate inferences, I'm only allowed two types of things. Now, fortunately, it's pretty easy to see here that pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences are term complements of one another, right? So if you take all the pleasant experiences that exist and all the unpleasant experiences that exist and add them together, you'd have all experiences, pleasant or otherwise. And same with things we like to remember and things we don't like to remember. Those are term complements of one another. So I've just got to pick a term to use, and then when I want to refer to the other term, I'll just use non. What I'm going to suggest to you always is if you have a choice between something like unpleasant and pleasant, always go with pleasant. Because when I say non-pleasant, non-P, I know that means unpleasant. But if I chose to use non-unpleasant as my term, then when I say non-unpleasant, I'm talking about pleasant experiences, and it starts to get hard to track because I'm doing all these sort of mental gymnastics. So this is going to be pleasant experiences for P, pleasant experiences, and then let's go ahead and use things we like to remember as R. Okay, things we like to remember, things we like to remember. Things we like to R. All right, so then we just go ahead and translate this out using P and R, or symbolize it. All non-P are non-R. There are things we don't like to remember. Therefore, the argument says, all things we like to remember are pleasant experiences, P. So now what I have to do is I have to figure out, is this argument valid? And what that means is I'm going to work from the assumption that premise is true. And what I want to know is, if the premise is true, does the conclusion also have to be true? And the way I'm going to figure this out is I'm going to look at these two statements and see how they're different. And I notice they're different in two ways. The first way is that their subject and predicates are switched. And the second way they're different is that I've got two nons here. Okay? Non and non. So what I have to figure out is, what is it that somebody could do with the operations available to us to that premise to get this conclusion? And so I just start asking myself, what allows me to switch the subject and the predicate? Well, conversion does. Contraposition does. All right, but aversion doesn't. And then the second question I would ask is, all right, so between contraposition and conversion, what would allow me to replace both subject and predicate terms with their term complements? Because that's what R and P are. R and P are the term complements of non-P and non-R. So if I apply the rule of contraposition to this premise, I'll switch the position of the subject and predicate and then change both the term complement. And that looks like it's exactly what's been done here. So then the last question I have to ask myself is the premise the kind of proposition that you can apply the operation of contraposition to? And it is. And what that means is, if the premise is true, that true value will carry over. Whatever the truth value of the original sentence is, will also be the truth value of the sentence you got as a result of contraposition. So if the premise is true, the conclusion would have to be true. And that's what makes the argument valid.